Welcome to the Lady Up America podcast. I'm Diane Canada. I am so glad you're here. Ladies, today I want to invite you into a really private, unique, cool conversation. This is something that a lot of people will never be privy to. You're going to get to hear what goes on really during this icky, yucky election cycle that we're now in the middle of. Like, what drives a lot of the stuff that we see publicly? What is really going on under the surface privately? It's like water cooler conversation that we're going to get to have today with my good friend Steve Gill. He usually comes on and delivers the news headlines for us for the week. And then you and I take it into the Tea Time Cafe and we break it down from a biblical perspective. But today he's going to just sort of let us into the kind of the locked room of what's really going on in these election cycles. It's going to be a really fun conversation. There's so many things that we don't know, that we don't understand as the layman voter out here anymore. And we know that politics has gotten out of control, and a lot of us just don't even want to think about it. It's icky, yucky. Like I said, we just don't want anything to do with it, and that's fine. But we at least need to not be deceived, and we need to at least understand how we're arriving at these particular stops in our culture, and hopefully it'll motivate us to get out and vote. A lot of us feel like, what's the point? My vote won't count anyway. The establishment's already picked who the nominee is going to be. Or we may say something like, what's the point? It's voting for the lesser of two evils. Well, you may hear some things today that might change your mind. So I challenge you to listen with an open mind and to come on in to the underbelly of what's really happening behind these ads and direct mailers and all that stuff that you're going to be bombarded with here between now and August. I'm telling you, you're going to want to hear this. Before we dive in, I want to ask you to do me one favor, if you will. Would you mind liking or subscribing no matter what platform you're listening on? That's going to help this show get discovered by a lot more people like you. We want everybody to hear this conversation that would be interested in hearing it, and that will help. All right, I'll be right back with my friend Steve Gill. You're going to want to hear this.
Taking back this house, taking back this town. Mama, don't back down. Just lay it up, lay it up, lay it up. Sidewalks are for bicycles, not for angry moms. Our children will know peace again, 'cause we're on the job. Yeah, lady. We're fired up and we're ready, so give us a little room. Get up. Our faith don't move that mountain now, just watch it move. Taking back this house, taking back this town. Mama, don't back down. Just lay it up, lay it up, lay it up.
All right, ladies, welcome back. Time to sit down with our dear friend, Steve Gill. He is the founding publisher at TriStar Daily. He had worked in the White House. He was on syndicated radio for many years. And he also does a lot of international television commentary, giving us a really solid perspective on how the rest of the world feels about America and what's going on. We couldn't be more grateful to have him every week. Please welcome Steve Gill. Hey, Steve.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you again.
Good to be with you too. Steve, you and I were talking offline, and I thought that we should bring that conversation to my listeners, because there are a lot of things about politics that, we don't know, that the average person, I didn't know, the average person doesn't know, that we just take for granted that they might. And I just feel like we could glean so much wisdom from you, having been around this arena for so long, and just share with women, kind of bring them up to speed, fill in some blanks, bring them up to speed on a lot of these things that we assume that they know. And I mean, some women are going to know, some women are not. But let's just kind of run down a list of how modern politics works. Why does so much money get spent? Where does that money go? What is a PAC? I mean, so many questions that we have, and you and I kind of prepared this ahead. So would you just help us understand? And let's see if we can't bring some ladies up to speed today.
Yeah, I think those of us that have been involved in politics for a long time, you for a number of years, me we're coming up on 4 decades. of being involved. A lot of times we assume that everybody kind of knows the basics of what we operate in and under, all the time. So with respect to, some of the ladies that may know what we're talking about already, others may learn something new. Others may go, oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. So I guess let's start with money because, money doesn't just talk in politics, it screams loudly. And the absence of it in a campaign means you're pretty much doomed from the start. People will talk all the time, well, I'm going to depend on grassroots. And those that say they're going to depend solely on grassroots are the ones that have no money, no ability to raise it. And there's another term that you use for those people after an election. They're called losers, not because they're losers personally, but because they do not win, because you have to have money to communicate, to get your message out, to spend on what it takes to even be a competitive candidate in this area. And it's gotten out of control. As we talked a little, I think, last week, the Kentucky congressional race, Kentucky Republican primary, they spent over $35 million. We regularly see, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent in state house and state senate races in Tennessee. In many cases, $1 million is kind of the ante for a state senate race. For congressional races across Tennessee, you better have a couple of $1 million at your disposal. And if you're running statewide, whether it's for the governor's office, whether it's for the U.S. Senate, you're talking 8, 10, 15, $20 million as we've seen in recent years. So these are huge numbers. And I think they're a little bit mind-boggling. I actually did some research a few years ago. If everybody, and I think at that time, the maximum you could donate in a statewide race, a governor's race, was about $2,500. If everybody who had ever given the maximum to either Republicans or Democrats donated to a candidate, you would tap out at about $3 or $4 million. You couldn't raise the 10, 12, 15 million that were being spent in campaigns just depending on people who would write you that maximum donation. So the first step is, how do you raise it? Can you raise it? And first of all, there are two types of funds. There's hard money and soft money. And I'm not talking about, somebody bringing gold bars to your campaign headquarters versus cash or a check. Hard money is the money that a campaign can spend directly. That's what's called hard money. That's the stuff of the travel for the candidate, the staffing for the campaign, the other day-to-day operations of a political campaign that require money. Now, again, some of that's going to be direct mail, some of that's going to be printed materials, some of that's going to be radio and TV ads. Hard money is what you spend as a campaign directly trying to influence voters, either through your staff, your travel, or whatever. Then there's what's called soft money. That's the money that is provided by political action committees. It can be used in two ways. There's really two kinds of PACs. One is an education PAC that can spend money. And again, none of these PACs are supposed to coordinate with the campaigns. It's supposed to be independent, separate. They can coordinate in some fundraising, but not in messaging. So if I'm a PAC that's an education PAC, I can't say, vote for Diane. I can say, call Diane and tell her we appreciate you standing up for the environment. We appreciate you standing up for education. Or you can say, call Diane. Tell her that she is, a worthless piece of poop because she is not defending our schools. I mean, you can either attack or defend, but the key is you can't say vote for or vote against. So a lot of times when you're hearing ads where you hear this, call them and tell them they're doing a great job, or call them and tell them they're doing a horrible job. Those are the education PACs that are able to spend unlimited funds to support a candidate, even if they don't say vote for or vote against. And then there's the other form of PAC that can actually go the next step and say, vote for Diane, paid for by such and such a PAC, not affiliated with any campaign or campaign committee. You're going to see that. That is the soft money. Most of those soft money campaigns spend almost exclusively on media, on buying TV, radio, direct mail. And that's what you're going to see your mailboxes filled with in the coming weeks, the TV airwaves filled, particularly in the fall. You're going to see a lot more of PAC spending, both for and against candidates. And that's the so-called soft money, and it's unlimited. And donors in those cases aren't limited by that $2,500, $3,500 per campaign contribution. They could write $100,000, $500,000 checks if they wish.
Yeah. So a couple things on the PACs real quick that I just want to fill in for ladies. Number one, you can always tell when it's a PAC. There's a rule in politics where everything that you send out or everything that you air has to have a paid for by disclaimer on it. So ladies, you can look and see if it's paid for, Marsha Blackburn or paid for by John Rawls, it's coming directly from their campaign. If it's like he was saying, an education PAC or one of these other super PACs, then you can tell by the paid for stamp. But can you explain to people, Steve, what a PAC is made up of? Like, how does a PAC form?
It is an entity, kind of like a corporate entity, where you literally file the papers. There's 501c4, 501c3, which are IRS designations that delineate whether you're one of the education PACs or one that can spend. So there is a specific process to create that PAC. You put individuals in charge of it, and then they can go out and, again, not only raise but spend the money. Most of the political action committees spend money on media. You have some that will fund Americans for Prosperity, for example, in Tennessee, will send out their volunteers to do door knocking for their preferred candidates, leaving door hangers on the door. That is a PAC operation at work that does some grassroots efforts in addition to what they may do with direct mail or radio or TV. But you actually set up an entity, and it can be an in-state, it can be operating in multi-states, and you've seen both. So again, there's a lot of ways you can get into the weeds on how those are operated and concocted. But the bottom line is they are not supposed to coordinate messaging with the campaigns. They can coordinate some fundraising. The candidates can say, hey, these are my friends, they're going to be helping me with a PAC. It'd be helpful if you'd go donate to them. But they can't coordinate the messaging. Now, what happens is a campaign will put up a lot of stuff on the internet, online, including videos, that then those political action committees can pull video that the candidate has put available for the public. They can then use those videos to make ads. So they will look very similar in many cases to the campaign's ads. So they're shooting the video, they're shooting the candidate, shaking hands, kissing babies, and then they can draw those videos and do their PAC ad that is not coordinated message-wise. But boy, it's kind of a wink and a nod towards, hey, we're going to send you this. And again, those of us who have consulted, those of us who've worked with both PACs and candidates, know that if I'm helping Diane, I know the issues that matter to her. In many cases, the campaign's putting its polling out, so I know the issues that are moving. We're going to talk about polling in a moment. So you're not coordinating, but if I know how you think, if I know the issues that are going to help you most, I know what I want to be doing as a PAC to help you in the best way I can. If I know that your opponent has these weaknesses, I know that from polling. I know that from sometimes even putting out public polls to let your team know, hey, here's the issues you should be working on. So there's a lot of ways to kind of deal in that blurred gray area between coordination and being well within the boundaries. And those are all legal. You just have to be very careful and have lawyers on board making sure that you're treading very carefully when you get to the lines.
Yeah. Yeah. And those outside PACs, I mean, they, like you were saying a minute ago, they can be in any state and help someone in Tennessee get elected or bury them. We just saw that in the Tennessee 7 race. We saw them come after Jody Barrett heavily, to bury him against Matt Van Epps. This is where a lot of people just get very disgusted, with politics because of just these outside PACs that are coming in and influencing Tennessee elections. So what could we say to people about that? That's not going to go away anytime soon.
Well, attack ads work. These kind of critical ads work because they work. People again want to believe the worst of somebody. So if I tell some really vile gossip about someone, people are going to believe it, whether it's true or not. And the lie travels faster than the truth in so many cases. Also, campaigns, because they cannot coordinate, really can't tell a PAC to back off. I mean, they can publicly issue a statement saying, hey, quit saying that, but they can't control the PAC. So, they kind of, sometimes it's, oh my gosh, don't do that. And they're telling them, oh no, really keep doing that. That's working.
Under the table.
but they can't directly affect what the PACs are doing with their messaging, and the independence of the PAC sometimes again is not quite as independent as it may look from less careful analysis. And on polling, and again, all the campaigns are going to be relying heavily on polling. And it's not just what we would call horse race polling. I mean, the media loves, who's ahead, who's behind, what's the gap, what's the margin. what campaigns are really interested in is that initial, I'm going to do a poll, and I want to be very careful of who I'm polling. I want to make sure I'm polling people who are actually likely to vote. So ladies, when you're hearing about a poll, is it registered voters? Is it adults? Is it likely voters? If it's adults, that means they're just polling people that really may not have much interest in politics, may not know much about the issues, may not know much about the candidates. It's going to be the less informed, less involved voter. And that's not really very helpful if you're trying to win a campaign, because most of those people aren't going to go vote. We just had municipal elections across the state with 11 to 13% turnout. In Tennessee, we regularly see 25 to 30% voter turnout. So if I'm polling people who are going to be in that 70% who are unlikely to go vote, their opinions don't really matter to me as trying to elect someone, because they're not going to vote. They may have an opinion, but that opinion doesn't get translated at the ballot box. So the second one is those who are registered voters. Registered voters are a little bit more likely to show up on election day, although again, even registered voters have a very low propensity to turn out, but it's a little bit better. And if you're several months, 6 months, a year out from the election, that's going to be a first good kind of filter of who you're polling. But when you get closer, within 90 days, 4 months of an election, you want to be polling likely voters, and not just people that say, oh yeah, I vote all the time. Because when you actually compare those who say they are likely to vote and are certain to vote to those voting records, you're going to find that a lot of people, I know this is shocking, it's not just politicians, but voters lie too. They all claim, oh yeah, I vote all the time. And then you check the record and they haven't voted in 10 years. So,
which is public record, by the way. A lot of people don't know that their voting record is public.
So if I'm concocting or putting together a poll, I want to poll people that I know based upon their voting records are likely voters, rather than them just saying, oh yeah, I vote all the time. Because again, you're going to be having a bigger margin of error. And again, the media may not care that much. They're just looking for clicks and views. If I'm running a campaign, if I'm a candidate, I want to know with a little bit more certainty, what do the people who are likely to actually cast a vote actually think and believe? Now, again, the media likes to always run what we call the horse race polling of, okay, this guy's leading by 10 points. It's now narrowed to this. And again, if you're looking at real likely voters, that gives you an indication of the movement of where voters are moving based upon the media, based upon the attention. And polls generally, again, from those of us in the political arena, are going to be a few days behind reality. So if I've showed that this race has narrowed from a 10-point margin for a candidate to a 3-point margin, it's probably a dead heat, because if it's moving in that direction, that momentum, that movement tells me something as a consultant or as a candidate. And then the other big piece that I think people don't often understand is that the campaigns, they like that, what's called top line, who's up, who's down, what's the margin, the demographics of, how am I doing among, 65 plus voters, 30 and under, men, women, whatever all the kind of demographic divisions are, that when the campaign gets that information, they're getting all of that breakdown of not just what people think, but who thinks what within the polling data. And that's as vital as anything. And then you also want to look at the issues. What issues move the voters? As you get closer and closer to an election day, whether it's a primary, whether it's a general election, you're going to have a large percentage of voters who've made up their mind. I despise candidate A. I love candidate B. You're going to have people that have picked their team at that point. And what you're really fighting on the last several weeks of a campaign are those undecided voters. Now, it'd be great for campaigns if people would have a little red dot or a blue dot for Republican or Democrat, and a yellow dot if they were undecided. And you could walk into a room and go, I don't need to talk to that person there for me. I don't need to talk to that person there against me. Oh, these 3 yellow dots, they're the ones I want to focus on. That's what polling helps you do. Who are the undecideds, and what are the issues that matter to them? A lot of us, as we watch a campaign, play out, I'm watching TV commercials, looking in my direct mailbox, and it's talking about issues that I'm going, why are they talking about that? Well, they're not trying to move me. I'm already in a camp, for or against. They've targeted and figured out the ones that are the most movable will move on that issue. And a lot of times what you see in a campaign, they'll figure out what are those issues, what those undecided votes need to move, and they'll put some ads up. One's going to talk about the environment, one's going to talk about safety in the community, one's going to talk about schools, and they're going to see which of those ads is moving those undecided voters the most, and then they're going to eliminate some of those other ads and go all in with those ads that are most likely to move those undecided voters the most at the end of the day. So there's a lot more to this process than I think people see when they're just seeing ads, attack ads, and pro ads. There's a lot, if you're funded enough, we get back to the money, to be able to run the kind of polling that doesn't just say, are we ahead or behind, but how do we move the voters that are still left to move? And then how do we get them there at the end of the day? One final point on the whole polling is, when you identify all of that, and in the last week or so, you move from trying to move people's opinions, for the most part, to making sure you're moving those voters who are for you to actually go vote. So we've been focused on, okay, the red dots, I'm going to leave them on the sidelines for now. The blue dots are against me. I'm going to focus on the yellow dots on their forehead, the undecideds. You get into the last week or 10 days, I'm going to turn all my attention, if I'm a Republican, to those red dots to motivate them to go vote. So my messaging may change. Instead of finding those issues that are going to move undecideds, I want to hit those hot button red meat issues that are going to get those red dot Republicans fired up, revved up to make sure they show up on election day, whether it's 120 degrees in the heat in August or whether it's snowing and hailing like crazy. I want to make them go no matter what, because I have motivated them. So again, during the course of a campaign, your messaging, your approach, the intensity changes pretty dramatically as well.
It really does. I mean, that was such a great rundown. A couple things just to kind of highlight in this is, when you're talking about who they're asking, who they're polling, I think it's really important for people to understand too, it's a sample. It's not like they're calling everybody in a county or everybody in a state. They're calling usually a sample of about 1,000 people, sometimes a couple hundred people,
yes.
Steve. So I want you to comment on that real quick. And then also that A/B testing you're talking about, like where they're testing out different ads to see what's kind of landing and what's sticking. How do they determine that? Does that get picked up by more polling on those people?
Yeah, first of all, I think with respect to the poll sample, a small sample size is going to have a lot more margin for error. You're not going to get as close. But again, even in a statewide poll, if you're making sure you get the correct percentage of Republicans versus Democrats, East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, rural versus urban versus suburban, age demographics. By the time you put all that together, you probably need a couple of thousand to have a really good, accurate poll in a statewide race. So when you see, again, when you're looking at polling, when you're looking at news reports, look at the sample size. If it's small, it may be intended to get a result that the campaign wants in order to move things along. Also, let me just mention, you'll also hear about push polling from time to time. In many cases, that's not really intended to move voters with respect to voting. It's intended to put out bad information about your opponent and under the guise of a poll. But sometimes we hear the term push polling because you're testing message that is negative about your opponent. You're wanting to see, okay, does the fact that they flunked out of college move voters against them? Does the fact that they've been divorced 3 times? You're not just trying to smear them. You're trying to figure that with your attack ads, what is really going to move voters the most. So what you'll do in those kind of, quote, push polls is you'll poll at the beginning, see where the numbers are. And then some of the questions that people may get when they get polled is, would it change your mind about Diane to know this, this, and this? Would it make you more likely to vote for Diane if you knew she was valedictorian of her high school class and has donated both kidneys to somebody who was dying? I mean, you want to put your positive and your negatives out there to see, again, how does it move voters? Because that movement is what ultimately you're really trying to do. And the polling is giving you the indication of what works best.
Yeah. And another reason why this polling is not always so reliable is because the way they frame the questions. So like if it's a Democrat poll coming out and they're polling Republicans, the way they frame those questions can result in a certain answer, and that can sway polls. And so I think people just need to understand that polling is a tool, but it's not the end all be all. And like we say a lot, that it's a snapshot in time, because you say it's a few days behind. So when the next big news cycle hits or something like the Hunter Biden laptop, for instance, when that came out, we know it was suppressed a lot, but that would have changed a lot of people's minds, and I think there's so much strategy that goes into a campaign that if people start to understand some more of this, like what you're sharing today, they're going to start to go, oh, okay, now I understand why things end up the way they do on election
and sadly,
day.
campaigns and friends of campaigns will sometimes run polls for the media to say, oh, look, we're so far ahead, nobody can beat us. Or, hey, this gap has really closed. I mean, sometimes they're not really accurate polls. And frankly, sometimes they're just completely bogus, that are intended to play for media approach rather than to actually gauge what's going on so that a campaign can make good strategic decisions. I think the other thing is that when you look at messaging, words matter. Mark Twain once wrote that the difference in the right word and the almost right word is the difference in lightning and lightning bug. I mean, they're very close, but they have nothing in common. So in your messaging as a campaign, again, you're testing that through polling. You're deciding what message is working best as you see your polling, see what moves voters the most, and picking the right words is very, very important. I was working with a candidate years and years ago who kept wanting to use the term with respect to abortion as pro-choice. It's like, you're pro-life. Why are you using the adversary's language that makes it sound softer than killing babies? Don't use their language that kind of disguises the issue and call your opponent pro-choice. He's pro-baby murder. He's pro.
Right.
So your language has to fit also what your objective is. And I think campaigns that don't think in terms of not just what the polling tells, but also what's the best language to communicate your issues, and certainly don't embrace your opponent's use of softer language if it doesn't advance your cause.
Yes. And one last thought I just had is to also be very careful, like what Steve just said, ladies, that a lot of times they'll run ads saying that they've polled when it's completely bogus. A lot of that is to diminish, to make you want to stay home, to make you feel like, oh, the race is futile. Oh, there's no point in turning out. This person's got it in the bag. So there's a lot of that stuff that goes on. Isn't that right, Steve?
Yeah. Again, the biggest advice I would have for every voter is be skeptical. Yeah. Dig a little deeper. When the polls come out, say, okay, where's, when you go online, what's the, you look for the actual poll, see, how much they distributed across the state. Was it registered voters, likely voters? Be skeptical, and then share what you find with your friends and neighbors, because everybody's not going to dig a little deeper like that. And that's where, the influentials in politics are so important. If I could, in addition to going into a room and being able to identify those with the red dot or the blue dot on their forehead and the yellow dot, I also want to find out who are those people that are at work around the coffee machine where everybody comes in on Monday and goes, hey, what movie did you see? Did you try any new restaurants? Yeah. Those are the people I want to win, because there's going to be 10 or 12 people at work that are going to listen to them when they say, oh man, this movie was great. Don't waste your time. This restaurant is amazing. Go try it. And this political candidate is who I want. Yard signs to me matter most when it's like, I know my neighbor, they have that yard sign in their yard. That message communicates because I trust them. So if you're one of those that knows the politics a little bit better, spends a little bit of time, you're more influential than somebody who just shows up and vote. I know you get the calls. I know I get the calls. I know many of our viewers get the call. Who are you voting for today? People are asking for that advice, for that information, because they trust you, and make sure that you develop that ability to give them reason why the candidate you've investigated a little bit more, the influence you've been able to develop, can help play a role in the political arena.
Before I let you go, I know we're going a little long today, but I think this is really important because we talked about this offline. And again, I really want our ladies to be able to hear from you directly on this. We're talking about how rhinos get in, or how people get in that really don't revere the office that they're running for. You said something to me that I'm going to give you the floor and let you re-say for the ladies, for those who do go and serve us in Washington, what are some things that we need to be aware of in the hearts and the minds of those candidates or those elected officials?
Well, it's the elected officials, it's the candidates, it's the bureaucrats who work in Washington. I spent a year as a White House fellow in Washington, the last 6 months of President Bush, first Bush, and the first 6 months of Clinton, and had a chance to serve throughout a transition in the U.S. Trade Representative's office as part of the executive office of the president as a White House fellow. And it's not just the candidates, not just the elected officials. I mean, the bureaucrats that inhabit Washington for decades develop almost a mocking attitude towards those of us in the real world. It's a little bit like here in Nashville. You've been involved in the music business. There's so many that mock, the people that come in for CMA that used to come in for fanfare. Oh, the Hicks are in town now, to meet their favorite stars. And people would laugh and mock the tourists that were bringing a lot of dollars to town. The same thing happens in Washington as you get people that stay there too long. The people that come to see the memorials, to tour the Smithsonian and the other museums, oh man, they're clogging up the streets. It's crazy. It's the hot summer season. We got to deal with all the tourists. My attitude when I was working there, and I believe it now more than ever before, is when I would drive in to work. We were living in Northern Virginia, and I would drive across the bridge past the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial. You would see the Washington Monument, stretching up to the sky. You would drive right past the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And my attitude was the first day I drove in and didn't get a lump in my throat and didn't feel that pride of being an American, that I would have stayed too long. And I feel like that about the people that are there, whether they're elected, whether they're serving as bureaucrats. If you don't feel that emotion when you show up to work that day, then you've been there too long and it's time to go home to the real world, because you're no longer connected to what America is, what Americans are, because those monuments are not just structures. They're a reflection of who we are, what we represent. And if you don't feel that, you don't belong there. And we have too many people in Washington, again, elected officials and others, who've overstayed that sense of why they're there, that emotion that they should feel when they show up to do the people's business every single day.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. More of that, please. More reverence for our country. Wow. I feel like we just got an incredible lesson. Thank you so much for everything you just shared with us. That was invaluable. Ladies, make sure you go to tristardaily.com and get all your news from Steve Gill. What a generous soul to come and share this with us. And he's the same way in all the news that he presents. He does it fairly, and he does it in a way that we can understand it, quickly and apply it. So go to tristardaily.com. Get your news there. Thank you so much, Steve. We will see you back next week.
Thank you very much.
Wasn't that an amazing conversation to be a part of? I hope you enjoyed that. I sure did. And I learned a lot. It feels like even though I've been immersed in this for about 7 years, I still learn so much. And I'm grateful to Steve for coming and sharing all of that with us. All right, ladies, I do want to remind you real quick before we go to go to DianeCanada.com. I've got some really great things happening there that I want you to be aware of. Got my new book that's out right now. It's also on Audible. I've got an online course. I want to invite you into my community, into my ecosystem, love on you, bring you up to speed in a lot of these cultural issues, but more importantly, teach you how to become a suburban missionary. Time is short. We are in the last days, and that neighbor that lives next door, that one that lives a couple doors down that God keeps putting on your heart, she needs Jesus. And I want to equip you and build your confidence and your courage enough to reach out to her. Before Jesus comes back, we want to make sure that anybody in our sphere of influence, we're doing all we can to make sure that they go home with us when he comes. All right. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lady up.
Taking back this house, taking back this town. Mama, don't back down. Just a lady